Hello, and welcome to our first official episode of TKO Stigma. It's a branch of the Keeping It Real series, and it stands for Talk Knocks Out Stigma. What is stigma? Stigma is a false view about mental health issues. Basically, a negative stereotype surrounding mental health and mental well-being. And in order to get past this negative stereotype, we need to be able to talk about it. And in order to help us do that, I'd like to announce my first official guest on this show. It's two-time Muay Thai world champion, Mr. Greg Wootton. Hey there, Greg!
Yo, what's happening?
How you
How
doing,
you?
man?
Yeah, good, thank you, dude. How are you, man? You alright?
I'm doing great, dude. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor and a privilege to have you on this show. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk about these issues because it's something so important for all of us, for a lot of people. They need to hear that it's okay to talk about this stuff. So for people who don't know who you are, you're the two-time Muay Thai world champ. You're coming from the UK, and maybe you could tell people a little bit about your journey, about what brought you here today.
Yeah, man. So like you said, I started martial arts training when I was about 15 years old, 16, and went on a bit of a journey with that. Didn't really have any aspirations of fighting or being a champion or anything, but I think it was the element of improving yourself and challenging yourself on a daily basis to become, or the way I saw it anyway, with getting better for fights. And that took me on a journey where I started dedicating my life to training and to competing, really. Lived in Thailand for a bit, and I fought for like 10 years professionally. I still I'm coaching on a full-time basis now, so it's how I make my living, amongst other things. And yeah, I managed to do pretty well in that. I got to the UK #1 spot, and then what else happened? I beat some really good fighters. I mixed it in with the best. So I'm quite happy with my career. I won 2 world titles along the way, and but I think in relation to mental health, I think martial arts training gave me a framework to deal with or to work within my mind. Martial arts and some other influences we can talk about later as well, but I think they definitely taught me from, or it's not really taught like in mainstream schools, or if you're lucky enough to have a parent or a friend, but otherwise we're not really taught about how to relate to our mind and relate to our mental health. Or yeah, so that whole concept is a bit vague, but martial arts gave me a framework for that, because in order to become better as a fighter and as a athlete, I needed to, in my view, I needed to work on my mind as well.
That's
So
great. That's great that you mentioned that, the mental health aspect, because that's what we're all about here at Sack Life Official. My mission in life is to wipe depression out from the face of the planet, and we're using physical training along with other mental health tools to do that, and they are really linked together. So learning those disciplines and things like that, and having that martial arts training is such a benefit to your mental health. I mean, I found it personally benefit to mine, and I'm sure
yeah,
you feel
man.
the same way. So thank you for that. And I want to just acknowledge everybody who's tuning in here. Thank you so much for everyone for supporting, for being a part of this. This is an open convo, so feel free to add comments, questions, share stories along the way. I may not be able to shout out to anybody, but I apologize ahead of time if I miss you. But I do appreciate that time. I appreciate every moment, because time's all we have. What's an example of stigma that you've encountered growing up in your career, in your upbringing? Because as a fighter, you kind of have a different perspective, or a different life experience than most of us.
So even before I started fighting, I used to play a lot of soccer, or football, like we call it in the UK. And I used to get super nervous before games, and before, yeah, particularly big games, and like not sleep too well. I used to kind of, when I get nervous, I used to go a bit more quiet. And a lot of my, like, well, I played for my school team and a Sunday league team, and everyone else deals with it different ways. And some people get louder, and but I used to just sort of retract within myself a little bit. And some of the other lads and stuff, they just kind of joke when I was being quiet or whatever, or I was getting in the zone or whatever. But people sort of take the mick about that a little bit. Nothing major. And then I think when it regards to fighting, when I found it difficult sort of being in the gym and training really hard and then feeling vulnerable for that, feeling tired or feeling weak or not having a good day or frustrated or whatever it was. But I put this pressure on myself. I don't know how external it was, but I put this pressure on myself to present myself as this strong fighter type, as this strong, sort of no weaknesses, not allowed to feel certain ways. And that was a pressure that I put upon myself, just from society, you know what I mean? Like when you go to the school I grew up in and the environment if you showed weakness, like you were prey. So like there were some rough kids in the school and stuff, and it was a bit it was a bit of a mixed upbringing. So like if you showed weakness, then you were a target and people would exploit that and they try and rob you or do whatever. So I think that sort of kind of like hyper masculine environment about showing your strengths and never showing weakness and stuff is also part of martial arts training. Because say in fighting, if you get hit with a good shot or whatever and you grimace and you show pain or you show you're tired, it fuels the other person and it also looks really bad against you. So I think I didn't get, no one sort of really overtly showed that much stigma against me saying, oh, you're calling me names or anything like that. I think for me, it was all mental. It was all self-imposed pressure to be a certain way and things like that.
Right. And that's more societal stigma or cultural stigma. A personal type of one-on-one. Like you may not have had an altercation or an instance where someone said to you, hey, you're not a real man or something for talking or feeling, but you have that pressure to have that masculine.
Yeah. To be honest, like the only people, like I've done a few talks where I've talked about things like body image and being conscious about that and things like that. And the only negative ones, the only people that are saying that that I've seen, I don't really take it very personally because it says more about that person. If someone was to say, like, say if you're opening up about something, overwhelmingly the response is always positive and is always, people will also open up as well. But if anyone's ever said any negative or I've seen comments and things like that, I think it says more about that person. And I feel sorry for a lot of the people that they want to comment on someone else showing their vulnerabilities. So the times when I have noticed that in comments, and particularly when I was fighting a lot, there were some forums going on and people would comment on the forums, and everyone likes to have their input, and the internet can be a vicious place for that, man. Can be a very vicious place because there's always somebody who wants to criticize, and these trolls and haters or whatever you want to call them. And when you are vulnerable, it's hard enough it can be hard to step above that and not let that tap into your insecurities or whatever.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I'm glad you touched on that, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is how it makes you feel when you encounter that stigma. And you've got a very logical, intellectual approach that it does actually say more about that other person rather than about you. For a lot of people out here, though, when they're not confident, when they don't have a good foundation, that external prejudice, that external input means a lot. It makes them feel really, really crummy, you know?
No, 100%, man. I think not like the view I have on mental health is that although I may be feeling a certain way now when I'm speaking to you, something could happen in my daily life or whatever, and it could switch it. And you're like any kind of health or fitness, for example, it goes up and down. And if you don't look after it, it can go certain ways. So I've had periods when I've been, haven't looked after my mental health. For example, I was overworking myself, trying to make money, or overtraining. I wasn't giving myself enough recovery. If I did, I felt guilty for it. I wasn't doing the good things, which are like seeing my friends, speaking to people, talking about stuff, taking time to do things for me, even simple stuff like not rushing in the shower. Do you know what I mean? Not rushing to get out there and get onto the next task and get accomplishing stuff. So there's in those kind of phases that then after a while, if you do that for too long, you like definitely start to notice my mind and the way I relate to myself and think about myself and confidence and things like that. That all starts to go down. So yeah, it's like any type of health or fitness. If when you know, no one person, I believe anyway, no one person is always at a steady point. And the statistics prove, like they say that as well, really, man. They prove that point that like 1 in 4 people will come across a mental health issue in their lifetime, and that's 25% of everybody, man. So it's
yeah, it's really an epidemic. Mental health issues are an epidemic. Depression, anxiety, those are the 2 top ones most people can relate to. And it's good to have a healthy schedule and not overwork yourself. Like you were saying, you're stressed, kind of rushing. It's good to be kind to yourself and respect your progress, respect your journey, and go at your pace and try to find that balance in life. Because a lot of us find something that works and we get excited about it, and then we overdo it and we wind up burning ourselves out, even when it's something good. You know, we have to find that balance so that we can have good, like a solid mental health, a solid self-care routine along with the routine.
Yeah. Have you found that then with what helps you then? Have you found that with your training or something, like overdoing it or?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I've gone through phases with this. When I first started, I did it for me. I had gone through a crazy life situation that left me with depression, left me with anxiety, and I bought a punching bag so that I could try and use it as a healthy outlet. I had heard good things about it. And when I started doing it, at first it was amazing. And then I started overdoing it for myself, and it was kind of wearing me down a little bit. So I had to kind of find that balance and find a space where I could look forward to it every day, because I've made it part of a daily routine where it's not too much, where it's not a burden. It doesn't really interfere with my schedule. We set a goal of 10 minutes for ourselves per day. Most people can find 10 minutes. You know, I waste 10 minutes thinking about what I'm going to do next. So I figured 10's a nice, easy goal, an attainable goal that we can reach every day. And we try to keep it light. We don't go too intense so we don't burn out. We try to keep that balance. And it really works. For me, it works super effectively at keeping my confidence up. And just, I can look back when I keep track of it. I keep track of that record, and I can see, all right, 249 days consecutively, I have met and accomplished my goal. And that builds up in the mind. It can build up with any healthy routine that you do for yourself if you keep track of it. So that's really what I found. That's where I found the balance in my training, and it's been super beneficial to me. Do you have something like that in your life, like a daily goal maybe that you accomplish and keep track of?
Yeah. I have a few, to be honest, actually. So you know, what I do in the morning is quite important. So it sets up my day, and I notice if I don't do certain things. So in the morning, I'll wake up, I have a load of water, and then I've been doing Wim Hof's breathing challenge. So I don't know, anyone doesn't know Wim Hof. He's a Dutch guy who's broken the world record for a lot of cold exposure. But he does this for a combination of breathing techniques and cold exposure. So I've been doing his challenge, and he's been teaching you about breath work and breath holds and things like that. So I'll do the breath holds. I have a cold shower, and then I'll meditate. So I've been meditating for since I was 18, pretty much every day since I was 18. Because actually the kind of two went hand in hand, in that the martial arts gym I was going to, like a 2-minute walk away, there was a Buddhist center, and they were cool because it was super cheap to go and learn how to meditate. They separated their classes from meditation classes and Buddhist classes. So initially I was going there just for the meditation ones, because I thought it was a way to help improve my performance when I was fighting. And after a while, it kind of seeps into that. You start to learn how to work with your mind, and you start to catch your habits and things like that. And I noticed the way that it started to filter out into the rest of my life. So I've been like carried on with those techniques. And more recently, I've been using an app called Headspace. There's also Calm, which is another great app. There's also where I am now in LA. There's another Buddhist center or meditation center, like a 10-minute, 15-minute walk away. So I try and keep that in my life and keep that practice going every morning. So at the moment I'm doing the breath work, cold shower, and meditation. So that kind of sets up my day. Even if it's 10 minutes, like you said, you've got your 10-minute key habit there. Same for me. I'll even if I need to be up really early and I need to be in the gym for clients by 6 a.m. or whatever, I can get up 10 minutes earlier, because for me it's worthwhile, and for what it does for my mental health and all these things, it's beneficial. So that's my daily I do. And then hopefully within the day I'll get to move at some point. I'll get to train with a friend. I really like training with friends, or go for a run, or at the moment do some sort of mobility or movement stuff every day anyway. And these things are super. They're key for me. Another one which is also key for me is what I eat. So I definitely noticed that if I have a lot of sugar, sugar's the main one for me.
That's my weakness, man. I can't stay away from sugar, dude. I'm like, I gotta be careful. And yeah, I guess that's a struggle for a lot of people. But it's interesting to me that you mentioned the breath work and Wim Hof's breath method. We had a question come in from Holistic Chris out there. She asked, what is it about martial arts that helped you mentally? But I just want to mention about Holistic Chris is a breathwork teacher. She's a women's wellness coach, and she was actually our first guest on another series we do. She shared a breathwork tool that's really helped her. And I've been doing that Wim Hof ice shower challenge as well. And she brought that up too. So it's like there's so many tools out there that can help us. All we need to do is educate ourselves about them, right?
Yeah. And I remember hearing this great analogy about all these different tools. It's like the analogy was that if you have a bucket on string, and you go to loads of different wells, and you put the bucket halfway down, and you move on to the next one halfway down, you're not going to get any water. So what you need to do is go to one well, or find one well, pick one, and put your bucket all the way down to the bottom in order to get water. So I see that like you kind of have to commit yourself a certain amount before you start seeing the benefits. For example, like if you do one breathwork session or whatever, you might feel good, but if you don't do that on a regular basis, you're not going to notice a difference. Or meditation or yoga or whatever it is, it's different for each person. So it is about trying different wells and trying different. It's about trying different things, and then once you find what works for you, it's then sticking at it and cementing that practice so you can really do it on a daily basis, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about that all the time on our training show, that this is something that's worked really well for me personally, and it helps a lot of other people as well stick into this like light training routine. But there's no one solution for everybody. We all have to respect our journey, respect our own personal wants and needs, and find, like you said, what works for us, and then be consistent with that thing, with those things that work for us personally. Did you want to touch on that question from Holistic Chris? She asked specifically about martial arts. What's helped mentally there?
Yeah, I think so. With martial arts training, there was elements of first of all, like the discipline and the respect that was shared between everybody, and then also yourself. So I think the mental practice for me, like one was controlling anxiety. So learning how to deal with anxiety. So every fight you have is, every fight I had, the opponent got better and better and better. So the risk of getting hurt or damage or whatever were quite increasing. So in theory, there was more reason to be anxious, and there was bigger crowds or whatever. But the thing with anxiety and fighting is like every fight you have is an opportunity to basically train and prepare of how to deal with that stress and how to deal with that anxiety. So I started learning, practicing different breathing techniques to calm myself down, different tapping techniques, affirmation. Like you start to learn how to cope with it, because you need to, otherwise it's very uncomfortable, and it's a part of the training in martial arts. I was lucky enough to have some really good coaches and training partners who helped me out with that. And then it was a combination of what I was also reading at the time. So being able to control my anxiety around fights, also being able to control your emotions within sparring and within training. Sometimes I'll admit it wouldn't happen and I'd get frustrated and I'd go harder on somebody or vice versa. But it's training your mind and your ability to control that in the ring, because if you go off topic, say you have a strategy you're supposed to fight, if you go off topic with that strategy and you're not following instructions, you've got a bigger chance of losing. Or if you get angry when you get hurt or something, you've got a bigger chance of losing. So there's controlling anxiety and developing a ability to do that. And then secondly, like emotions within that. And then also being able to be present. So walking into the gym, if you're thinking about what you got on later on or afterwards, what you get eaten or all these other stresses, it's an ability to, and it's a practice in putting those down, coming into the gym and staying focused for that time period, which can then, it's a bit like meditation, moving meditation, because then that's what you're trying to do elsewhere in your life as well, is stay focused and be more present when you're at home with your partner or when you're reading or all of these kind of things. So yeah.
That's a good point. Being present, and I can see the similarities between. I'm not a fighter. I've never been in the ring with anybody. I've just been doing this training for myself, for my mental health. But I have a similar experience, because when you're in that zone, when you get your head into that zone where you're focused and you're thinking about all those different things that you've learned to carry out the fight efficiently. It's the same with the training. You have to think about all these different aspects of your body, and it takes you out of that past, out of the future, and puts you right into the present zone where that stuff doesn't affect you. So that's really cool. And thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about speaking about mental health issues? Because a lot of people feel like it's a weakness to speak about these things.
Well, I think when I was younger, for sure, I wasn't able to speak about them. I was probably I cared much more about what other people thought. And when you care about what other people think, this affects you, and like, it's not a healthy way to live your life, man. So as I've got older, I've got more confident. I've grown into myself through things like through training and becoming more confident. All the other practices that we spoke about there, started to know myself a bit more, and also become more comfortable and at peace with myself. So like with my strengths and weaknesses, shortcomings or whatever. So now I definitely say there's still it's still a tricky topic, because it can be. There is a lot of shame attached to it about admitting weakness, and there can be a lot of shame and fear of judgment and stuff, and that's totally normal. But I think overcoming that is a part of the healing process, and is a part of it's a part of life, really. Learning how to be vulnerable, like you don't have to do on a platform like this, like speaking to your friends and learning how to do that with your friends and loved ones. So I had a year when I was fighting. I decided I was going to go teetotal, so that meant I just had no alcohol. I don't take drugs in it anyway, but going teetotal meant that when I first met my partner, who I'm with now, when I first met her, that I had to talk about my emotions when I was totally sober. So telling her how I felt about her making the first moves and things like that, which was quite difficult. It's a difficult thing to do for fear of rejection and things like that. But then I also I sort of made a promise to myself that year that I was going to also just be big enough to say that to my friends and just be like, yo, you're my boy. I've known you for time. Like, yeah, I care about you, man. You know, like, we're cool, like we're good friends. I really like, I appreciate you being in my life and whatever. Or tell people nice things, give more compliments. That was what I was trying to do that year, rather than, you know, like like I don't know, in the UK anyway, the only time people are expressing like affection is when they're bantering, taking the piss out of each other, which is very, like, the banter is pretty strong in the UK and in Ireland as well. But or they're like drunk, so they'll be up like after a fight show or something, they'll be drunk and they'll be tipsy, and then they'll say, "Oh, I love you, man." Blah, blah, blah. But it's like we almost need alcohol and other things to come into it in order to have those conversations with our friends, which is a bit of a shame, really.
Yeah, and I think most of that comes from this stigma that it's weakness, that it's a weakness to speak about these things. And I think, like you were saying, vulnerability, it is like being vulnerable may be viewed as a sign of weakness, but from my perspective, at least, I view it as a sign of strength. You were saying it's kind of also a sign of maturity, because you're growing, and as you grow, this is your natural, you know, you mature as an individual. And to me, it shows great strength to be willing to be open, even when it's privately with a friend or with a partner. But being willing to be open about these things that we feel is a sign of strength, because you're doing something good for you. You know, you're breaking that stigma. You're pushing past that external pressure saying, hey, you know, this is bad, this is weakness, don't do it. You're pushing past it. Speak about it. So to me, I kind of view it as like to be open, you know?
Yeah, there's I think the sort of the risk of being vulnerable is that it won't be reciprocated or it won't be accepted. So say it's most common with like romantic relationship. You like somebody and you ask them out, whatever, and you get rejected, or even if it's your partner and like you make a gesture and it's not received the way you want, it's hurtful. But that sort of fear of putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, it's worth the risk for what's on the other side. Do you know what I mean? So if I'm saying stuff to my friends or to my partner, it's a risk, because I might get hurt, and my feelings might get hurt, and then I might have to deal with that, which is fine, because we shouldn't always only do things if we know we're going to get a certain outcome. So
yeah,
if you do express your emotion to these people, generally most of the time your relationship will get better. You'll be like, with your boys, you'll know how each other are, or with your friends, and you'll be a lot tighter as a friendship group. Or with your partner, your relationship get better. With your parents, or with whoever. Do you know what I mean? So it's it is risky, and it is difficult for a lot of people, but it's kind of worth the risk if you're prepared to do that.
Absolutely.
Or in a place to do that.
I found I've throughout time growing up, I've lost friends. I've lost, you know, partners, and I've had different situations where I've lost people in my life, and that was part of being open and being honest with them. And it's better off for me. It was better off for me, because I get to refine the people I'm surrounded with. I get to find the people who are genuinely compassionate, who are genuinely concerned, and we have a genuine connection. And that's way more fulfilling in life, to have genuine friends and connection, than it is to have the superficial kind of relationships where we joke around and say hello and pretend to be friends, but we don't really connect on a deeper level.
Yeah, like I think this current climate and like what's going on now with everyone being locked down in their houses, I've definitely missed seeing people, and I've missed even like I can chat to people online and stuff, but the physical connection, the kind of the energy transfer that you have, I miss that. And like just seeing like one of my friends commenting there about after sparring, so after like training together, it opens up the doors. And I think particularly with men, more so with men, because we're having more barriers and more pressure for it. But if you're able to say train together, you kind of let down your barriers to a certain extent physically, and then this can open up for conversation and things like that. And I think, yeah, like you talked about with community aspect as well, being open with one another and having that strong community of being there for each other. Like martial arts gyms are amazing for that, because all walks of life enter those gyms. So I remember being a kid when I was at school, and I was chatting to lawyers, and one guy was going to become a politician, another guy was a laborer, another guy couldn't speak English, but you all communicate and you're mixing it together, and like the community aspect of that was strong, man. And I think that element of training is what I'm really missing, and even coaching. So I don't really have it so much as I'm not competing at the moment or anymore. But when I'm coaching, I love one of my favorite things is into the interaction, the energy transfer, like learning about other people's lives, just feeding off each other, and then the building of that community, which is something special. Which because I think we all kind of want to be part of something.
Yeah,
To a certain
absolutely.
extent.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because that social connection is something that we talk about with the Sack Life thing as well. I try to encourage people to get out there and train for their mental health, for their mental well-being, and they get to make these types of connections with other people who are also working on themselves, even if they're just there for physical reasons. They've got that progress, growth mindset, and it's something that you have in common, and you work together. You get to have someone hold pads for you or hold the bag or give you instruction, and you kind of work back and forth with sparring partners. You're the teacher, you're also the student, you're going back and forth, and you have that connection. And that's so important for mental health. Like you said, we all kind of want to be part of something bigger down at our core. We're social creatures. So to find that connection through martial arts, I found it super powerful. I built a gym here, and I was basically inviting people in to spar just to feel the benefits of mental health, the mental health benefits of that training. But in doing so, in creating a space, I was able to attract people on that same level, to spar with, to grow together, to kind of move in the same direction. And it's been amazing in my life. It's an amazing feeling to have that kind of support. So I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's one of the things I'm passionate about, getting people out to where they can better themselves and try this avenue, because it might work. It might be the thing you're waiting for, So thank you for that. And you touched on too the pressures that men have, right? And I wanted to touch on that, because it's a serious thing. It does affect men from a whole nother set of angles, because there's this pressure to be a man, tough it out, and not talk about things or not feel things. So have you seen, in your experience with other fighters or your experience growing up, how this affects men specifically, this stigma?
Yeah, I have, man. Yeah, so like this kind of school I went to and the environment I grew up in, it was very much about that, presenting yourself in a certain way. But when I wanted to, again, talk about how great martial arts gyms are, but it could be any sport, it could be anything like that. But when I went to the martial arts gym, I started Thai boxing. On a Saturday morning, there used to be these older champions, so like a couple of the older fighters that weren't competing anymore, but they used to come in with their children and their kids and train with their kids. And that was like a great one for me to see at that age, because I then had this like realization that, wow, you can be this masculine guy, like this fighter, have wars, win belts, be a bit of a G in that sense, and then at the same time you can be this tender father looking after your kids and training with them, and like you can be that sensitive person and be the other one. So that was an amazing one for me to see, because I hadn't really seen too many examples of that. So there were some great examples of that, but like the mental health statistics around male suicide and things like that, they are quite frightening. And one of the gyms I was at in the UK called Manor London, which you could probably reach out to them as well, man, because they're actually running a mental health campaign at the moment called Strong Not Silent. And that was we also, when I was there last year, we ran that campaign, and we had the way that it worked so effectively is we had groups of men would come to these events. We trained together in one of the Manor gyms, and then we'd run to a local Lululemon store, I think it was, and they were helping us put on a space, and we'd have speakers. So I spoke about with another ex-professional boxer. We spoke about vulnerability on a separate one. another ex-pro boxer and someone from ex-military. They spoke about identity shift and things like that. So I think opening up is difficult for men because we're worried. A lot of the time we're worried about how it's going to be perceived and seen as weakness. But through training together, and say like, it's as mad as it sounds, by sparring, say like me and my friend Abdul were talking about sparring on a Friday night. We used to have like hard sparring sessions, punch and kick each other loads, and then afterwards that kind of dropped our barriers, and it's very hard to sit and talk openly. Whereas if you're walking or playing football or whatever with people, it makes it so much easier particularly for men to open up. Just because we're not really programmed to speak about our emotions that much, and we're not really often we're not even that aware, to be honest. Like part of the meditation practice that helped me was becoming aware of it. So
yeah, and that being active, I definitely have felt that. I've seen that with other people, that being active kind of helps break the ice and make that connection where you feel like it's okay to share. It's okay to, you're both kind of growing together. You're working on things. So I think that I agree with you on that. It breaks that boundary. And also, I just wanted to thank you and just take a moment to recognize that you yourself are being an example. Like you mentioned those men who brought their daughters to the gym, and that set an example for you. But I want to thank you for you using your platform and your position in society to be an example for others, because you're viewed as a champion. You're viewed as kind of a symbol of power, a symbol of, dominance and success. And it's a very masculine position to be in where you're at. And by being open and talking about these mental health issues, even on this show and on those other platforms, you're doing an amazing thing. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the sort of what you related champion to there being like dominance and success and things like that, I think that's kind of, or what I hope it's becoming, is kind of old school now. That's the old school stereotype of it. Because so one of the other things that helped me more recently was I read a book called The Way of the Warrior, Shambhala, Way of the Warrior it was called. And this book was quite, affected me, influenced me quite a lot, because it talked about being a warrior in the sense that I hadn't heard before, like not being this stereotypical warrior, but being a warrior in the way that you conduct yourself, like being there for people that you love. Being a warrior would be like a father. He gets his girlfriend pregnant. A guy gets his girlfriend pregnant. He's there for them for forever now. He's there looking after them. Or if you see your friend going through a hard time, a warrior steps up. He doesn't shy away and be like, I'm too tired to go around and help this person or do that thing. So it's a different way of looking at things, as you talked about champion being about dominance and things like that. This book helped me, and it almost aspire to step into those roles of being a warrior and being in a different sense that stereotypically we know, which on the movies is about that stoic silent type that doesn't say anything or whatever. But you can be different. You can be silent but express emotions, and that's a different way of that sort of shifted my mentality about what I wanted to become and the way I wanted to live and the code I wanted to live by.
That's awesome.
So that was
Thank
cool,
you for
man.
sharing. What is it called? The Way of the Warrior?
Yeah, Shambhala, The Way of the Warrior. Yeah,
Awesome.
Cool book, man.
Yeah, and me too. It's not that I have that old school mentality, but I recognize it's still kind of there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the things we're working on changing. So awesome. Thank you for being a part of that. And at this point, I just want to remind the audience that you guys feel free to ask questions or leave comments. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. There's a lot of names scrolling by on this text thing. They're going pretty fast, so I apologize, guys. I do appreciate you being here. Every moment counts. Every moment matters. So thank you so much to anybody who's tuning in. And I wanted to ask you, Greg, how have you personally benefited from ignoring stigma and being open in your life? What's a benefit that you've seen from that?
Yeah, man. So much. I think if you pay attention to it, it's just it's like listening to someone having a go at you. It's like listening to somebody. It's like everyone has it, that that voice and that internal monologues in our heads, and if we pay attention to that, it just gets stronger and it makes life harder. And we're like, I'm a big one for this as well, and I'm still kind of working on it, of being my own biggest critic. So
Yeah.
for example, I'll give you like a fighting example, is that I used to train as hard as I could every fight, because I often didn't feel like I was good the last fight camp. So I used to train harder because in my back of my mind, I wasn't as good enough. And that was massive motivation to train as hard as I could. It wasn't a healthy motivation, in the sense like, for training it was quite effective, but for the rest of my life it wasn't that, didn't serve me that well. And then when it comes to when it comes to transferring that outside of the fighting zone, it comes down to things like me maybe being a perfectionist on Instagram. So for my relationship with Instagram is quite difficult. I find it quite challenging. So sometimes I'll post and sometimes I wouldn't, and I'll kind of be on there but not really posting. But I've tried to be consistent over the last month or whatever, since this quarantine has happened. And part of that is not listening to that biggest critic, which is being like, sometimes I'll write something and think to myself, oh, that's nonsense. Like, people are going to slam me for that, or people can say this about me, or can say that about me for it. And that voice is still there. That voice that got developed when I was young and in a certain environments, that's always going to be there. But whether I choose to listen to it and how I choose to relate to that is up to me. So like, if I do, like you talk about the stigma, if you're listening to it, it's almost like listening to your worst enemy and taking their opinion for granted. They don't want to see you succeed or prosper or benefit. They just want, they just want you to be negative. They want to kind of see you miserable and things like that. So sometimes you can personify it in that sense as well. If that makes sense, is like, yeah. So sorry, I've gone on a bit of a rant there, but
no, not at all. I mean, yes, a lot of us are our own worst critic, especially people in creative fields. And I found boxing training to be a very creative thing. You get to create your own training routines. You get to create your own style. And a lot of people that I know from the creative aspect, musicians, artists, and other people working in those fields, always feel like what they've done is not the best. It's not enough. But a lot of them are successful, and a lot of them are highly regarded in society, because they are their worst critic. Everybody else, they're not being that critical. Everybody else like can appreciate all the good points, all the positive sides of what they're creating. And that's that's a mentality I try to help people shift, is like, give yourself credit for what you've done. Give yourself credit for the progress you're making, for the performance that you put on, for the work that you've produced. Please give yourself credit for that, because other people are praising it for a reason. It's good. You know, it's good stuff.
Yeah, but it's I often wonder about this, because it's a good point as well, because I feel like if you give yourself credit for all the good things you do, you'd stop, like maybe you'd stop quite early. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't be as driven. So I think it's a double-edged sword, in that it makes people achieve quite a lot, but it also is not a recipe for happiness. So say fighting, we connected you through to Thai boxing and stuff, or training. But with fighting, if I was happy with my performance each fight, I wouldn't really train as hard for the next one. If I was completely there, if I was content after I won my first Southern area title or whatever that is, it wouldn't drive me to become better. Whereas striving for those, like the Michael Jordan documentary, and is popular at the moment, but these athletes' mentalities is that nothing is, you need to be training the hardest, nothing is good enough, and you can always improve. Like, so it is a growth mindset, but it's also, like you say, it doesn't sit back and pat yourself on the back about how good you are now, because that will kind of stop you being hungry. Like for me, it was about the hunger to try and be one of the best in the world, and training and pushing my body beyond what it was physically capable of sometimes. So I'd get sick or injured or whatever. But mentally, I knew that my mind was stronger than my body. But at the same time, on the flip side, that would also make me not very happy. And I'd win fights or I'd win titles, whatever. But in my head, I was like, oh, I didn't look the way I wanted to do. I didn't use the techniques I wanted to do. Well, but I was very critical of myself. So although it brought about success on one level, it also brought a lot of discontent and I wasn't happy on another level. So it's been a difficult one to try and shift that. To try and shift that perspective.
Yeah. Do you think that you can be happy and give yourself credit for your accomplishments, but not be complacent? Do you think that's possible, or is that something that we have to strive for?
Yeah, no, I think there is a balance. I think there is definitely a balance to be had. I think trying to be the best in the world at anything is probably not a healthy thing. So, like in essence, like a lot of athletes probably aren't happy. And when I was at a university, so I studied sport and exercise science. One of my university lecturers was she was a specialist in, she was a sports psychologist, but she was specialized in burnout. And so a lot of athletes that would just burn out mentally and not enjoy the sport anymore. But she told us that she was working, she didn't name names, but she was working with some great GB Olympic athletes who'd won gold and who'd achieved what they'd been working for their whole career, but were depressed and were upset about that. So I remember hearing that and thinking, like, at the time I was still coming up and I was still young and I was trying to work towards getting world titles and things. But I remember thinking, if these gold medalists, Olympic gold medalists, if they're feeling depressed and they're feeling sad, they have all this sadness and they have all this lack of drive and motivation after they've after they've achieved what they were working towards, then I kind of felt like basing my happiness or basing your happiness upon those achievements isn't a healthy one. And I always try to keep my good friends close, and I always try to have a separate identity from fighting, which was difficult when it takes over your life. But I always try to value myself in other ways as opposed to just as an athlete, or valuing myself only because this and this, because it can be quite limiting. It was difficult because when you're trying to become the best, you inevitably are spending so much time of your day doing it that it takes over. But yeah, anyway.
Yes, it's consuming. We try to focus on growth, and the process is our goal. Instead of focusing on that end result, we focus on how can I make progress every day? Can I do one thing that makes progress every day? And be driven towards that. Be driven to improve, because you always have room to grow. And that way, there's no end. It's always good. It's always beneficial to grow. And there's no like, I achieved my goal, now what? That moment's never going to exist, because we're going to keep getting better and refining ourselves in different aspects over time. So I think there's a differentiator there. Tyson Fury, I don't know if you know, Tyson Fury, two-time heavyweight boxing champion. He said that he had this goal of boxing heavyweight champion of the world, and he thought that would be the thing that made him happy. And then when he achieved it, he went into an even deeper depression than he had before. And then he later said in an interview with ESPN that the training, by focusing on the training as his goal, that's what's allowed him to have that kind of solid mindset where he no longer is plagued by these, I have to get here, I have to get there. It's just, I have to do my best. I have to keep working on myself. That progress mindset.
I think we can never not be reminded enough. We can always take that, be reminded that it's the journey that's important, and it's the process rather than the outcomes. I feel like you can never really hear that enough times, because it's so easy to forget when you're striving to go towards something, which is inevitably, like we spoke about, probably won't bring you the happiness that you're expecting, because there is only the here and now, and there is only that present moment. And waiting, I used to get into bad habits during fight camps of waiting to live after the fight camp. All right, I'll be this person afterwards. I'll experience life fully afterwards. Whereas that's not true. It's here and now, which is the only thing we have, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got about 8 minutes left. I just want to check on some of these comments. We had a lot of comments coming in here. Abdul Yassin said, what are some of your affirmations you used in your training camp?
Yeah, so Abdul's a good friend of mine. He was actually a good, massive part of my training camp and things. So thanks for the question, Abdul. But for me, like, most powerful one was like saying I believe in myself. So I believe in myself, because when you're behind the curtain about to go out and fight or do something which you've got a high risk of failing at, your belief in yourself gets tested. And I remember learning very early on that if you don't believe in yourself, like, why would anyone else? Or what chance do you have of winning? Or what chance do you have of doing whatever you want to do? So believing in myself was one. And then another one was like, I'm a positive person. I believe in myself. And then when it came to doing things like fighting much better fighters than myself, I would say having these mantras and affirmations, like anything is possible and like I can beat anyone, because we have this sort of limiting belief that I can't beat this person because they've had 5 times more fights than me, or whatever it was. But if that is the way that if that sort of thoughts is in our head, and you kind of need to smash through that with anything is possible, affirmations like that, reminding it, sinking it into your subconscious that you can do anything you put your mind to, really. So I used to do a lot of that. I've kind of changed it from when I was fighting, though, because when I was fighting, I was striving towards those goals, and I was so hungry to reach those goals that that we talked about, they weren't really going to bring me happiness. So there's much more holistic ones, or much more balanced ones, which you can say now, which is one of the powerful ones which I had, which was I love and accept myself as I am, or I'm fine as I am. So it's like when I was in fight camp, I always need to be better. I always need to be more ripped, more fit, faster, stronger, whatever. Whereas if you can be happy with yourself as you are right now, then that's the place to actually make change and build from. So that was a much better, a healthier affirmation in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be happy with yourself before you can offer it to anybody else, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you can't help anyone else if you're, what's the saying, man? You're no good to anybody if you're not good to yourself. Yeah,
that's one of them. I think there's a lot of you can't pour from an empty cup. That's one of the ones, you know. You have to, and especially like as a coach too, I'm sure you have to be confident. You have to be secure in yourself and give yourself enough credit so that you can effectively teach someone else. That way they pick up and they'll be inspired by you, not only trained but inspired. So and I don't think we have time for, I had another really good question for you, but maybe another time we can catch up, because they're going to cut us off in 5 minutes. So okay. I just wanted to wrap up. If there's anything that you'd like to add, maybe to let people know. I know you did a video training series with Warrior Collective, and if people want to check that out, where can they find that?
If you check that out, I've recently, it's not in my bio at the moment, but it's if you go to Warrior Collective, the website, and you check out full tutorials, I'm under there. You can check that one. I've got a load of podcasts that I recorded recently. So one with my friend Jump Lift Sprint, Mustafa. Another one, the crack epidemic, with my Irish friend Shane. So there's more, like, if you're interested in more things, but in following me, you can obviously do that on Instagram and stuff. But yeah, that's it for me, really. Thanks to anyone that tuned in, however briefly, and thanks for people that listen in the comments and stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Greg, and once again,
no worries, man.
And I appreciate you being here and doing what you're doing out there. It's good stuff. I'm looking forward
likewise,
to
man.
And
thanks. Look forward to seeing your platform grow, man. Keep it up, man.
Yeah, we're doing this. We're not stopping. I'm going, to the end. So I gotta keep it up. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. You too, man.